everybody. Thanks so much for joining. I am super excited to have our next guest here, David Dibble, and welcome to the International Symposium on Innovation in Education. And thank you so much, excuse me, thank you so much for joining us for our fourth session here. David is going to be talking with us about the universal law and saving an education system crying out for change. So a little bit about David. David Dibble is the creator of 3D Healthcare, a revolutionary systems improvement model designed to transform healthcare delivery from the inside out. Unlike traditional models such as Lean or Six Sigma, 3D Healthcare offers sustainable improvements in quality of care, patient experience, staff well-being, and profitability, both in frontline care and C-suite operations. With over 20 years of consulting experience, David has authored 3 books on 3D healthcare, including a case study on its successful implementation. Inspired by his time with Don Miguel Ruiz, author of The 4 Agreements, David integrates these principles into healthcare systems to foster a culture of excellence and compassion. And I am so glad, David, to have you here with us. Thank you so much for joining.
Valerie, this is just such a pleasure. I just so love what you guys are doing, and it's an honor to be here.
Oh, thank you so much. Now, David, I would love to hear your thoughts on what we're doing. So what you're doing is a lot of healthcare, but it also can be with the education system. And I would love to hear the connection of universal law in regards to the education system and compare it with healthcare.
It's actually interesting. Healthcare and education have a lot of the same characteristics and issues with them. I had, going way back, this was back in the early 1980s, I ran into the work of Ilya Prigogine. And Prigogine had won a Nobel Prize for his law of dissipative structures in 1977. And I ran into his work and went, oh my gosh, well, this law describes how all systems and subsystems in the physical universe grow, evolve, and change. And so it turns out that the law not only is working out in deep space and star systems and that sort of thing, it's also hard at work here in human-made systems such as healthcare and education. So that's kind of what I want to share today, is a little bit about how are these universal laws really at work today, and can we use these universal laws to actually create change that we're looking for in these big systems?
Yes, absolutely. Well, tell us more about that. That's so interesting and I think so relevant.
Well, the law is really very simple. What it says is that a system, and we have to realize that the physical universe is made up of systems and subsystems. And so every system has a certain amount of energy that comes into the system and a certain amount of energy it can dissipate. And when those two things are about equal, you have a stable system. But in a changing environment, what happens is the systems are called on to change, but they don't. Matter of fact, they resist change, and it turns out resistance to change is part of the change process in nature. And so resistance to change requires more energy coming into the system than the system can dissipate, and this stresses the system. And of course, as the system continues to resist change over time, more and more stress is coming into the system, which creates more and more dysfunction, until it reaches a point that Prigogine described as reorder. And reorder basically means the systems fly apart. They can't contain the stress energy anymore. Now the energy is still there, but you can't identify it as a system anymore. Mm-hmm. And then over time, that energy coalesces again to create a completely new system, operating at a higher level of functionality within the changed environment. And so this is how everything changes. How everything changes in nature and in the physical universe, and it's also how everything changes in human-made systems. We basically are just not aware of that fact.
Mm. I think that's so interesting. And that is so true. I mean, change is constant, and change is something that we have to embrace. And nature gives us those kind of examples and leaning into that. But it's so difficult. The change is so hard. And I know, like, from my background in healthcare, like, I see it on the healthcare side, but also so true in the education side as well, where it's just humans, I don't know, it's hard to change. It's just like we don't want to change, but sometimes it's in allowing that process, almost allowing it to be. I feel like it can be so helpful.
Yes. Well, there's a really interesting thing that I sort of stumbled into over the years, and it's that the human mind is also systemic. And so it's also at the effect of the law of dissipative structures. So here's a really interesting thing. As you probably know, burnout has become a huge problem in healthcare and also in education. I mean, we're burning up our healthcare workers, we're burning up our teachers, even admin people, are starting to burn out too. And everyone's looking at resilience and how are we going to get these people to be okay and continue on and that sort of thing. But they don't understand that system stress is passed on to the people that work in those systems. And it's that system stress that's the primary root cause of the new pandemic of burnout, both in healthcare and in education. And so if we want to resolve the burnout problem, we have to basically fix those systems that people are working in healthcare and in education. And the real problem with fixing those systems is it really can't happen top down. So we see it, the people at the top are trying to figure out how to fix healthcare, but that it can't be fixed top down. It has to be fixed bottom up. So we have to go in and actually work locally with whether it's caregivers, that are taking care of patients, or whether it's teachers and students and parents that are looking at fixing the education system. So it's hard, I think, for people to realize that, look, we are the ones we've been waiting for, and we have to be the ones that are going to make these changes, and it has to be local.
Yeah. I think that's so fascinating how you say kind of like the top down, it's not working. How can we do this from local? How can we do this amongst ourselves, amongst our communities, our schools, our communities, our healthcare systems? How would you recommend for us to come together to do that? What are some ways that can help with this? As you so eloquently said, the pandemic of burnout. I like that wording.
Um, well, I mentioned that the human mind is also systemic,
Hmm.
and it naturally resists change. Matter of fact, the the human mind resists anything outside itself. So you can imagine, we identify with, with the mind. We say, I think this, I believe that, that sort of thing. But anything outside of that is naturally resisted. However, there are some, I would call them almost pioneers, that are coming forward and saying, okay, I am now ready to go beyond what I know and into the unknown in order to learn how do we make these types of systemic changes wherever it is that we have the most interest. So if it happens to be, let's say, in education, then I would say, come forward and we'll teach you. We'll teach you how to bring the people together that can make these changes, and then how to go about the process of actually making the systems visible, identifying the critical variables within the systems, and then making the changes necessary to basically transform either healthcare or education locally. because that's where the work is going to be done. But you can't do it with the same thinking that had created the problems in the first place. I think that was Einstein that said that, but it's really true. We've got to expand our thinking, and we actually have to heal the people who have burned out in these highly stressed systems, so that they can do the work that they are here to do.
Absolutely. I think that's so true. And it is um, so interesting. I think that, Ambreen had asked earlier, like, why is change so hard, like for us? Why is that something that's so difficult to do? And maybe not in the individual level, but in the systemic level, or can you tell us more about that?
Sure. We know that for people, change is the hardest thing.
Yeah.
And it's because, for practical purposes, all human change takes place first at the level of the mind. So, in other words, we have to look at, let's say the mind is made up of thoughts, beliefs, and memories that we identify with. Now, that's also a dissipative structure. So it naturally resists change. And so what you'll see is people will tend to resist change until things get so bad that they can no longer resist change. And at that point, they will go into the unknown. So they'll go beyond what they know. I always bring up the sort of the example of the abused wife. So the abused wife stays with her abuser much longer than she probably should, because the abuse is familiar and she knows that. And the unknown isn't. And she's much more afraid of the unknown than she is of the abuse. But at some point, the abuser comes home and does that one more thing. I'm making it up. Maybe hits the kids for the first time. And at that particular time, the emotional content of her experience, there's more fear in staying than there is in going into the unknown. And so she picks up the kids, throws them in the car, and drives into the unknown. And at that particular point, she expands. She expands that old mindset to include maybe even the things that she hasn't quite realized yet. But driving into the unknown, she's starting to make the unknown the known. And in that process, she creates freedom for herself and basically expands and heals to some extent. So that's really the big thing, I think, in why we stay stuck as people for so long, is because that's the nature of the mind to do that. But here's the thing. We also can change out of the emotional energy that comes from kindness. It doesn't have to be from fear. And so that's, I think, where the real opportunity is for us as humans who could maybe understand a little bit that, we're not going to change the world with more fear. Not really. We have to start looking at changing the world with kindness and love and compassion. And we can, I mean, there's just as much that type of energy out there as there is fear. And now we have to become masters of kindness, systemic kindness.
I love that, David. And I think that's so true. And I know you and I have talked about that, like this kindness in healthcare. How do we do kindness in healthcare, but also in the education? How do we, with baby steps, I think sometimes even choose love over fear? And it really can be that simple in the moment, in this next moment. How do I choose love over fear? And I think that's so key, where when you talk about this expansiveness, it makes me think of the garden, and like it's wintertime right now where we are. I know you're in California, David, so it's beautiful. But I think of the sun. and I think of plants and I think of how they grow. And sometimes they have to grow in certain ways. Like my tomato vines, they kind of twist around in certain ways to get towards the sun. The basil have to grow taller. Their plants do different things. Sunflowers move, all those type of things. They can't be stiff. Like when they're stiff, like James Clear talks about that in Atomic Habits, like where when you're stiff, it's almost like death almost, like if that's what life is changing, is growing. And I think that's so beautiful that you are saying that it starts with kindness over fear. And David, I would love to mention too, as we're talking, I know that you also are collaborating with Dr. Jen Fraser and Robin Simpson, which they'll be in a panel later on today, which I encourage everyone to join as well at, I believe it's 3 o'clock Eastern time, on the courageous kindness. Is that right?
Yes. I'm really excited about this.
Yeah.
This collab. These are two amazing women. I'm just going to tell you that right now.
Awesome.
I mean, they are strong and kind and wonderful. But yeah, what we're doing is we're sort of doing a mashup of kindness and brain, the science of kindness. As it works on the physical reality and the brain and that sort of thing. And we're doing a mashup with systems and the law of dissipated structures and that sort of thing as a model for leadership and management. So, taking leaders from fear-based command and control, which are creating all these problems, that we're seeing in the workplace, including burnout. And now we're giving them another model that we can aspire to and begin to move toward to basically resolve many of these problems that we're seeing in the workplace.
Yes, that's amazing. And I'm super excited to hear more about that in the panel. I have a question here where do we start from in such chaotic state of systems, especially in the education system?
I think you have to start locally. And I think a really important thing is in order to do this type of work, let's call it kind systems work, which is what would actually make the systems-based changes you would need locally, you have to use a pull strategy. You cannot use a push strategy. And what that means is the pull is kindness. And so I would say, learn how to do this. If you can learn, how to facilitate, let's call it 3D education rather than 3D healthcare, because you can apply it anywhere.
Yeah.
If you can learn to do that, then you could reach out and you could pull people forward who want to be kind of these pioneers or these champions, for change locally in the education system or in healthcare. And you can start doing the work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So true. I think that's so important. And it makes me think of, and sometimes learning is, and we've talked about like with our other amazing speakers too, it's not just in the classroom, it's outside of the classroom. We can learn in so many different environments. And when I think about like in healthcare, when you'll bring it back to that for a second, just because I think that when I try to teach something, if I'm not feeling safe, if I have fear, like saying from like a patient side or something, or let's say with a student side, if we're not feeling safe, how are we supposed to then learn? Like it's hard to learn. And so that's where that love, I feel like, comes into place, like loving that love over fear. And anyway, I'm kind of just thinking out loud with that, David, but it just reminds me of that hierarchy of needs and safety, but also feeling loved brings that safety, if that makes sense.
It absolutely makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
As a matter of fact, all of us, of course, carry energy. We carry emotional energy that comes from both stress and fear and from love and kindness and compassion. We all have it. And in a safe space, you can begin to feel those emotions and that emotional energy. And that actually is what does the healing work that is necessary in order to create transformation in the workplace. In other words, you can go in and do all the great systems work in the world, but wounded people, they will basically sabotage the system's work. And so you have to grow and heal the people at the same time that you do the system's work. And we have to ask, well, what actually does the work? And the answer is, you would describe it a little bit as safety or kindness or compassion. And it's really having a safe enough place where people can begin to feel those emotions and that emotional energy in themselves, because we all carry it. And if you look at safety, what is it? It's being in a space that isn't fearful. Yes?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So that's key, is, when we're actually working with people, is to create or be a catalyst for the creation of that safe space. I would call it kind space.
I love that. I love that. Now, David, I feel like I can talk with you all day. I just really enjoy everything that you share and all the wisdom you bring. Can you please tell our listeners, whoever is listening live or to this replay, where they can find you, where they can learn more about all the incredible work that you're doing?
Well, my website's got everything on it about 3D healthcare and 3D in general. That's thenewagreements.com. And I'm also quite active on LinkedIn. And so I would love to connect with you. So come on aboard.
That's great. I love it. So now, is there anything else you would like to share with us? We have a few more minutes, and I would love for anyone who has any questions or anything else that you would like to talk with us about, David. Love to give you the floor for that.
Well, I would just say this courageous kindness program that
Mhm.
um, Robin and Jen and I have been working on for months now. Hopefully, we're going to have this thing done in the next month or so. But I would really love it if people would keep an eye out for this. I really believe that we're looking to scale this into the world in a way that makes a real difference in the workplace and in the world. And if we can, I believe this, if we can scale this into the workplace, we're looking at healthcare and education and actually a little bit in government right now as starting points. But I think we can make a difference in the world, a real difference in the world. And I also think it's imperative that we do. And when I say we, I don't mean just Jen and Robin and I mean you and I. We've got to do this because the law of dissipative structures is not waiting around for us to get it. And if we don't jump in and start making these changes in some of these macro systems, human-made systems that we've created, these systems are going to continue to deteriorate. And we're going to wake up one day and all of a sudden we're going to go, what happened? Where did healthcare go? What happened? Where did education go? What happened? Where did government go? Because that's what the law of dissipative structures does. It basically destroys systems that won't change to basically clear the space for the new.
Hmm.
And we don't want that to happen. And it doesn't have to happen. We can intervene and we can actually use the law of dissipative structures to speed positive change, as opposed to just letting it, run on its own and take us through what will be a very painful process of clearing the space for what's next.
Hmm. So true. So true. I think that's so important. And I am really looking forward to learning and seeing everything that you, Dr. Frazier and Robin, have in store for us, because I think that is so important, really examining key macro systems and seeing what can we do so this does not happen, how can we make a difference. And thank you so much for all that you're doing, David, and I really appreciate all the time that you took to tell us all about this. And thank you for everyone in the comments who are saying things. Matthew here, Impact Activators, Barbara, Ambrian, everyone else here. Thank you so much.
Love you guys.
Thank you. Much love to you. Choose love over fear, right?
Yes.
Yes. Great. Well, thank you so much. Have a wonderful day, David.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.